Good morning and welcome to our event today, a live coffee break conversation with Toby Poston, CEO of the British Vehicle Rental and Leasing Association, the BVRLA. And apologies for those of you who are hoping to see Alex Georgiana. I'm his colleague Elaine Mesky, a Principal Consultant and EV Infrastructure Specialist at Steer. There is a chat function here for you to share your thoughts and comments as we go, but please note that we won't have time to take any questions live. We're delighted to have Toby with us today at the first event in our Ramping Up series, which aims to help investors and charge point operators, CPOs, amongst other organisations, to navigate the inflection point in Europe's demand for EV charging. If you haven't already been following our insight articles in this series, please don't forget to sign up. The UK has recently completed its first full year under the ZEV Mandate. We are at a critical point in the country's transition to an electric vehicle paradigm. In late February, government closed its public consultation on this legislation, in which it gathered evidence from automotive manufacturers and retailers, the energy sector, government, and other key stakeholders. Today, as we look forward to outcomes from the consultation, we felt it was a good opportunity to take stock of our progress in adopting electric cars and vans while anticipating what government response may be to the market observations. In his role as Chief Executive at the BVRLA, Toby represents the interests of over 1,000 member organisations. He maintains deep insight into the relationship between government and our nation's road transport sector. So welcome, Toby.
Thank you for having me.
Our first question is, just looking back, how has the UK done in its first full year under the ZEV mandate?
So I think the first thing to say is depending on what news you read or what mood you're in, I think most people would say we scraped there with the car target, or we narrowly missed it, but in a way that didn't sort of damage massively the confidence of OEMs in particular. There were no huge fines handed out. I think the car trajectory was obviously hit. It's a slightly imbalanced market. In terms of it was all coming from one area, but I think it's in terms of a massively ambitious piece of legislation, the government can definitely say it didn't break the system, it didn't break the industry. We got there or thereabouts. So I think overall they can be pretty pleased with themselves. I think if you look at the van target, then there's no way of sugarcoating that. That was a big sort of red flag fail. We didn't get anywhere near the target that we needed. In fact, there's clear evidence that the van market has stalled. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I think overall, with a massively ambitious bit of legislation that's unique across the world, I think government has to be pretty, and industry indeed have to be patting themselves on the back a bit that we've got this far relatively unscathed.
And what do you think government needs to respond to support the enactment of the ZEV mandate in this coming year? What can help accelerate particularly the electric van uptake amongst commercial fleets?
So I think government really is if you like, they inherited the ZEV mandate, right? So Labour, they make this point a lot of the time that they did not design this mandate, they've inherited it from the previous government. But they agree with the overall fact that, and industry agrees as well, that we need a target and we need some certainty about how we're going to get there. The situation we're in is that obviously the world has changed in the meantime. You go back and you set targets, 3 or 4 years ago when the mandate was being designed, and then, stuff gets in the way geopolitically, technologically, economically, politically. And things have changed, and there's certain more pressures on the market now. There's rivalries from China, there's price issues. So I think the government has to show, and this is what industry is looking for, that they can, within the constraints of that, quite rigid legislative framework that it's got with the mandate, that it can tweak things to help smooth the process. And that's really where government is at the moment. That was what the consultation was about, was to find out where people are across the industry, whether you're an OEM, a fleet operator, a vehicle owner, or a charging company, to understand where their pain points are, how confident they're feeling. And government then, within its own constraints of financial, regulatory time, legislative time, has to come up with a bit of a plan. And I think they do need a plan. I think there is a general consensus across the industry all these industries, that's something, not that the mandate needs to change. I think there's remarkable consensus on that probably is our best bet, but that they need to do some tweaking around the edges, and whether that is fiscally, which obviously involves money, or whether it is on the regulatory side, which could be a lot cheaper. That's really where government needs to respond, and within that have a bit of a narrative to show that it understands what's going on and is listening.
Yeah, and we've had obviously the plug-in grant extended, which applies for new vehicles. There's the changes in the derogations. Do you think they will be enough? Do you think that anything else is required around those mechanisms? And yeah, any further kind of innovations maybe industry can bring as well?
Yeah, so if you look at the sort of two main areas that I think government is looking at, the first one is the shape of demand in the sector. If you look at the ZEV mandate, it is a supply side piece of legislation that is pushing supply into the market via these targets for OEMs. And although we mentioned that we either sort of met them or nearly met them, the picture that is the scary one is how they were met. If you look at where the demand is coming from, and the demand in the UK is overwhelmingly coming from the fleet and business sector. It's about half of all car registrations and the majority of van registrations. It's coming from businesses that are using some really powerful incentives on the car side, mainly the benefit in kind incentives. And if you look away from that market, we're nowhere near the mandate target of 22% for last year. Retail demand is more down in sort of the high to mid-teens in terms of demand. So both on the new market and on the used market, that demand is just not where it needs to be. And if you want to continue on that growth trajectory and keep setting higher and higher targets, and even supporting the BEVs, the million and a bit electric cars that are on the road at the moment, you need to start firming up that demand, because if you like, you're building up a Jenga tower just with using one type of brick, and it's just really going to totter unless you strengthen it. So that really is where we're looking for support. I would say our industry that owns nearly 500,000 battery electric vehicles is particularly worried about the used vehicle market, where there are no incentives for a used buyer to go and buy a used electric vehicle. Quite often these vehicles are depreciating really rapidly, so that's very expensive. And really we need government support here to sort of just strengthen that market, and that market is how the whole electric car ecosystem grows from that. Really, most people finance a car, they take a car on a lease or a PCP arrangement, and really they are paying for the cost of that vehicle over 3 years. If that vehicle starts depreciating rapidly because there's no buyer for it at 3 or 4 years, then that new car becomes more expensive. So that's a real area that government really needs to get to grips with. And then on the other side is obviously with charging infrastructure, where we have really for a Labour government, a massively sort of glaring unfairness at the heart of the transition, where someone who is charging their vehicle at home has access to a private charge point, and about 800, 900,000 of those across the UK is benefiting from the cheapest, fuel you can imagine, probably paying, I don't know, 3-4p a mile, compared to someone who is having to charge the electric vehicle on the road, is paying quite often, if they're using a rapid charge point, a fast charge point, more than they would to put diesel or petrol into their vehicle, and that's just unfair. So that's a glaring anomaly that government, really from a PR, from an economics, from a fairness point of view, needs to get to grips with.
Yeah. In terms of EV infrastructure, the investors that are developing the infrastructure, they're focused on predictable growth in the EV park, which drives demand for their charging services. What outcomes should they be anticipating in the ZEV mandate from the government's public consultation?
Yeah, so again, this is one of the benefits we've got in the sector, is that really our goals are all aligned, right? So whether you're a charge point company that is investing billions in infrastructure ahead of demand, or an OEM car manufacturer, vehicle manufacturer, investing billions in upgrading your plant, your factories and your production, that's where the mandate certainty gives you a real value. So charging companies are looking for the same things, but they've got little tweaks that they need that they can already spot that would improve things. I've mentioned the first one. First thing government could do is address that unfairness piece, and one of the most obvious ways of doing that is just to cut the VAT rate. So there's a massive, one of the reasons for that differential between the cost of public charging and private charging is public charging is got a much higher VAT rate. So government could equalise that relatively simply. There'd be a cost to it, but I think it would be a hugely popular and a very, very powerful message to get out to the industry. There's also a couple of other things they could do. There is a scheme called the RTFO scheme that currently gives fuel providers subsidies to put biofuel in their petrol. Government could extend that same scheme to energy companies. It's done in the continent. It's why you see a lot of energy companies having big charge point networks across France and other countries. They could do the same in the UK, and hopefully we get a similar result. And then there's some really, not all the issues that government needs to do are really sort of expensive, time-consuming things. There are some really quite simple things. I mean, I was amazed to learn that public charging cannot be signposted on the road network. That there are rules saying that you can't signpost your local EV charging station. You can do it if you're a service station, but otherwise there's quite ridiculous rules to say you can't. That would be an easy one that you could change. With a simple piece of legislation, hopefully. And then there's some other minor ones around, not minor ones, but more detailed ones about just improving the signage on charge points so people understand what price they're going to pay and really what is the real world speed of charging they're going to get. Maybe enabling people to, down the line, be able to book charge points or have better access to information about what size that charge point is, so they know if they can fit their larger vehicle, a van or a minibus into it. So there are a mixture of things. There's some big ticket, expensive things, but there's also some sort of just really housework that needs to be done to sort of address some of those minor legal things that maybe were forgotten down the line.
Yeah, and that accessibility on those charge points, that will help not only van drivers and commercial drivers, but those with disabled users and their needs as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's crucial. In terms of numbers, we seem to be doing all right with the public charging infrastructure rollout, but it's that accessibility piece, that knowing where they're going. So
yeah, do you think? I think I don't know what the latest figure. I mean, they're going in at pace, right? But I think I heard someone say the other day, and it must be around that. I think Charge UK have got figures as well. We're probably at or over 1 million charge points now, public and private, which is not far off. The number of electric vehicles we have on the road. So you often get this debate between, do we need to set targets for charge points, or do we just need to work really hard ensuring that we have the right charge points in the right locations and they are accessible and user friendly? And I tend to be in that later camp.
And is it something your members report on, maybe the ones that have already transitioned or newly transitioning to zero emission vehicles? What do they report as their pain points in the early days of driving electric vehicles?
So as I said, we have a really diverse membership. We've got 500,000 vehicles on the road, but the vast majority of those vehicles are being run and operated via company provided vehicle schemes. So they are more often than not taken home by an individual and either charged on a drive or at their workplace. I think the members of ours that are at the real sort of pain point area of dealing with charging infrastructure troubles are either the fleets that have vans in particular that need to be taken home where the drivers don't have off-street charging, or they are sites, quite often rental sites, where you have swift turnaround of vehicles and you need rapid charging to be able to either bring in a van or a car and quickly charge it up and turn it out and get it on with its next customer or on its next job. And that really is probably one of the hardest issues that the sector needs to get to grips with, and is one that is going to take years, is around grid infrastructure and the ability to both upgrade that, but also even get access to the ability to upgrade it. We have a variety of network operators in the UK that operate to different schemes and different processes for updating or upgrading your network, and it's quite often in a different language, it seems, in terms of how you speak to these organisations. Some have costs involved, some don't. depending on what the state of the local infrastructure is or where you are. Sometimes you pay more than you would in another environment. So we could just do a lot to sort of smooth that process, make it more predictable, make it faster, and sort of again give people confidence that they, the confidence to go electric is about confidence in the vehicle and the infrastructure, and you need those to coincide.
Yeah, and the energy industry is undergoing massive changes, and they've tried to they reduce the cost of the connection, but then that's been passed through to capacity and standing charges, which obviously impacts the CPO business case as well. You mentioned their salary sacrifice vehicles, essentially. What are the trends there, and have you seen any, I guess it'll be soon to come, the impact of the announcements in the budget on, for example, national insurance? How might that play out in the salary sacrifice sector? Is that something?
Yeah, so salary sacrifice has been the outstanding growth area for electric vehicles probably since the start of the decade. Really, it's been the key business model that has democratized access to electric vehicles. We think the market is probably getting towards over 150,000 now. It is a hugely popular employee benefit, and our analysis shows that actually, to that point about democratization, it is over 50% of these vehicles are going to people on the lower rate of paying the low rate of tax. Over 50%, our data suggests, are female. So it's a really, really good success story, and I think government is really liking that fact that it's, that for a long time there were stories that the people that are benefiting, the traditional view of company provided vehicles is it's going to middle-aged, white collar workers who are just getting it as a perk. Whereas in truth, a lot of these vehicles are either doing essential jobs or actually now via salary sacrifice, they are going through to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford a new electric vehicle or even a new car at all. So massively important, and I think government recognises that as well, that it is a key sort of benefit going forward. I think again with the national insurance that could also be a benefit. Obviously, with a salary sacrifice arrangement, you have to think carefully about someone's pre and post tax pay. But again, we've got that wrapper that it's delivered via an employer with the expertise of the leasing company. And you have all that sort of bundled support in terms of maintenance and insurance and that sort of stuff that comes with it. So again, it for certain people wanting to go electric but maybe lacking that confidence, it's an ideal solution for them.
That's great news. Coming back now to that ZEV mandate and the government consultation, when and how should we anticipate the government's response?
Yeah, this is the $100 million question, right? Where I think there's a lot of impatience out there. I've been at meetings and I've seen in the press where, on the one side, OEMs are saying, look, if you want to save the UK automotive industry, save jobs, save, that industrial manufacturing footprint in the UK, you've got weeks or months to act. You haven't got years. And also we see, vehicle fleets and owners saying literally, the costs associated with owning these vehicles is going up so fast. We can't persuade people to come into electric because the costs are going up. So there's a lot of pressure on the government to sort of act and both restore confidence and also secure jobs. I think we're going to see two types of lens that the government's going to be looking through when it responds. One is going to be that immediate requirement to sustain the flagship manufacturing base in the UK, to keep Nissan, to keep BMW, to keep Stellantis, Toyota, building manufacturing with that base in the UK. So I think the most likely outcome, I'm not sure it will come as soon as this week in the spring statement and forecast, but the most likely outcome is there will be some sort of not tweaking of the mandate targets, because that would be would send the wrong message, but also be a hugely onerous undertaking in the courts. But there is potential for them to tweak the flexibilities, and this is the reason that we didn't hit the target on cars last year, and yet no OEM would have paid a fine. There are flexibilities in there to either to sort of borrow future credits from future years, or lend them to other people, or to maybe swap van credits with car credits. I'm not an expert on that area. We haven't lobbied intensively on that at the BVRLA because it's for OEMs to do it. But that is, if you like, the safety valve that the government can use to maintain the targets, but ensure that we maybe get there a bit slower between now and 2030. And you know, that to me seems sensible, considering how the sort of the world has changed, how costs have changed, economic situation has changed, the global industry has changed. So that, you know, that they'll be the experts at doing that. I'm sure they're talking to OEMs and doing all sorts of analysis around how they can change that. Then obviously you get to more, if you like, if the government then is minded, that's the minimum I think they will have to do. But if the government is minded to sort of double down on the targets and say, no, we just scraped this year, or we didn't hit them, we want to smash them, then it's going to cost. You know, it's the only real other way to get there, to meet that forced supply, is to force demand, because, you know, markets are organic. People tend to move into a new technology when it either makes cost sense or it makes usability sense. And, you know, we are not there at enough scale at the moment with the electric vehicle market. Yes, if you're a company provided vehicle driver, it makes sense. But if you're retail customers, I said, that equation, either cost wise or, you know, public charging wise, or if you're a van driver, you know, productivity wise, you know, range wise, it's not there. So to encourage people to jump, then you're going to have to dangle carrots, financial carrots. And that is where things like grants or incentives come in. And that's expensive. To shift a market on this scale. You are talking tens, hundreds, millions, maybe even billions over multiple year period of time that the government would need to invest to do massive change. There's smaller thing. So I don't think they're going to do that, right? They haven't got the money to do that. I'd be amazed if they're going to do that. On the lesser scale, there are probably a few sort of totemic minor tweaks that would still cost millions, but would be more palatable to Rachel Reeves's budget. And that would be things like maybe the impending changes to VED, where you've got the expensive car supplement charge coming in, and even VED rates coming in full stop for electric vehicles. And that is again a big clear and present coming in the next week or two, cost that they could get rid of. So they could say, going forward, we're not going to charge that expensive car extra VED cost for EVs at all, or we're going to move that threshold, because the threshold for that charge is at £40,000. And today that's a cheap electric vehicle, right? So that is not an expensive electric vehicle. So they could heighten it maybe towards something like 60,000. And that would be a big PR move. That would be a big positive communication to the industry, that would, again, I think, boost registrations and not cost a massive amount. It would still cost a lot, but it would not cost a huge amount. So I think those are the sort of areas, and there's a couple of other ones. I mentioned the flexibilities. Another one that's worth mentioning on the van market is probably the number one issue that van fleets tell us is holding them back, and that's the regulatory burden. So government made a really sensible move early on when it said that we recognise that electric vans need to have a special derogation to be able to run at 4.25 tonnes instead of 3.5 tonnes, because the battery adds a lot of weight. And they did that. But what they didn't do is change the regulation around operating a vehicle over 3.5 tonnes. So you end up with this crazy situation where a van driver who's driving a heavier electric van is treated like a truck driver in terms of their license, in terms of their annual test of that vehicle, in terms of the mileage they're allowed to do. And van fleets told us that is a major, huge blocker to registrations. And when we even did a bit of research that suggested that if the government changed those bits of regulation, you could probably lead to over 100,000 new electric van registrations over the next couple of years. And if you think we had 20,000 registrations last year, you would hit the mandate targets for 25, 26 if you did that, according to our research. So that to me is an amazing prize that the government has shown they're looking at, because they consulted on it at the start of this year. That could be a really good piece of news. So I think there are three bits there, right? The van regulation and the flexibilities wouldn't cost the government anything apart from a bit of time and a bit of effort to do some regulatory change. Could be really good wins, and then we can maybe hope for some other tax and grant and incentive moves as well.
That's great, Toby. Thank you so much. You've really shown the lay of the land and what opportunities there are at low cost to make a real big difference in the EV and EV infrastructure business and to help us transition to zero emission. We're coming up to time now, so I just want to say thank you again for your insights. Thank you to the audience for joining us, and just to look out for the recordings of this session, and you'll receive more information in your emails about the work of BVRLA as well as STEER. We have a few events coming up as well. So in the Ramping Up series, we have our panel event, Unlocking the Value in EV Infrastructure Investment. That's on Monday, the 12th of May at 4:30 p.m. online. And BVRLA are hosting their Fleets in Charge event on the 2nd of July in London. So you'll receive more information about those in your emails. Thank you very much and goodbye. Have a great day.